Hello and welcome to Nikon Sessions. In this episode we're going to be talking about shooting an image and then how you go on to finally edit that image and choose which one you really like. I'm joined by Harry, Carolyn and Pep. I know who you are and I know what you shoot, but if we can start by going through a couple of introductions.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, it's great to be here, so thank you very much. My name's Harry Skeggs. I'm a fine art wildlife photographer, shooting exclusively with Nikon gear, and really excited just to be here with some amazing photographers and just to nerd out a little bit about photography.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, my name's Carolyn Mendelsohn and I'm a portrait photographer, and I'm really interested in amplifying the voices of those people that aren't usually heard through my work, and I love to create work which is based on story.
And I'm Pep Bonet. I'm from Mallorca. I'm a founding member of Nur Images. I've been photographing issues for the past 20 years, and lately I'm more focused on things I love. So basically I'm a filmmaker and a photographer and a rock and roll addict.
I think the biggest thing to take away from that is we have such a great mix of different people and different styles of photography, so I'm really interested in the things that we're going to talk about. So I think a really good starting point when it comes to taking images and then editing images is obviously things have changed quite drastically throughout the whole period of photography. We obviously know that we started out shooting film and developing film images, so I appreciate that some of you would have done that, you've developed those images. Do you think that there's a different approach now between film and digital, or do you think that it's the same thing? You still end up with a final shot, or do you think the process is a little bit different? How I ask you that first.
Well, so I never shot film, but I actually come from a painting background, and I think really across a lot of the arts, these things end up in the same way. I think people, they tend to think about things, painting is totally separate to photography, but actually the process is still the same in that you still have an artist who's conceiving something, an idea first. However you decide to develop that, whether that's with a brush or a camera, is sort of irrelevant. You're still ending up with a picture which has thought and hopefully some sort of artistic decision making going in there. So I still think however these things develop, the kind of fundamentals of it kind of stays the same.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I go through that same process of a little bit tweak here, and I suppose that comes on to a question we'll talk about later is when do you stop, and when do you know when it's done, right? But do you think there's a difference between film and digital now?
I think there is a real difference. I think there's a slowness to film that, though I think you can be slow with digital, I think as I've got more experience with digital, I tend to work quite slowly with it. I think digital has democratized photography and has enabled everybody to take photographs. And like you were saying, it can be a wonderful art form as well.
Yeah, I think it has changed a lot. I used to love shooting film. I loved the darkroom. I actually took me a long time to embrace digital because I had learned for so long, and I love the process of slow cooking. I think with digital, the only issue I have is shooting too many photographs. And that makes it a very, 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 very tiring process, with the film. And I remember I would go with my little loop and, enjoy and just, put a sticker or mark with a marker. And, that contact sheet also was, already a proof of how things were, and all this has disappeared. Even though I still shoot film every now and then, but it's more for a pure romantic feeling. I think digital has many advantages, but one of the disadvantages is editing.
It's easy, isn't it, I think, to get caught into the trap of relying on digital, just being able to shoot, make mistakes, and just shoot way too many images. For me, for instance, you get confronted by a line, rather than think about how that image works, just fire off the photographs like as a video almost, and just hope you get lucky. And then spend hours just going through images, hoping one's good. And I still think, there's so many good lessons to have learned from, whether it's from painting or analog or whatever, about choosing a moment and trying to create that, rather than just pulling the trigger and just hoping you get lucky.
Yeah, so this I think has a lot to do if you're documenting and documenting reality and things happening in front of you, or if you are creating,
Yeah,
I think if you are creating, digital has also, it could be the same advantage as film. But at the end, it's a lot of time that you're ending with the digital because of that bursting, and I have the feeling with the film, you're shooting one picture and you know who you want to hit.
Yeah.
And with the digital, you just hit everyone and we'll see who we hit, And with the film, after 36 exposure, you had to change the role. So you were careful and you were picky about what you're trying to hit,
Yeah, I think the danger, I'm a obviously I take portraits, so I try to kind of really connect with the person I'm taking a photograph of. If I'm just scattergun approach to photography, then I'm not connecting with them. But if I'm breathing and I'm taking that picture on the digital, then I am. And the danger is, for me, if I take too many photographs, and so many of them are the same, then number one, it's storage, and number two, it's, did I need to do that? Can I work in a more considered way? And I think you absolutely can. And it does depend on what your subject matter is, doesn't it?
Yeah,
so,
it does.
you know, I don't really need to have 30 frames a second for my portraits, but you may well.
Comes down to control.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when you can control a scene, I guess, particularly with portraits, and you can ask them to do things, you can revisit compositions. Whereas with wildlife, you know, once it's gone, it's gone. And so there are times when you do need to just fire it in high frame rate, particularly when you think about photographing things like birds, and there are certain attractive wing shapes and certain unattractive, and it's sort of impossible to do that if you just do a single shot. But I still think taking that time, just stepping back a little bit and just asking yourself, what are you trying to do? Get it right in the shot. I mean, it always pays so many dividends when it comes to editing, because you're not just having to hope you get lucky, you know you've got it, and then editing is a simple process, both in selection and also the kind of actual edit itself.
I'd really like to pick up on one of the things that you mentioned about, which was the romance of film, right? And I think a lot of people have this idea that there is still quite a romantic thing about film and editing. Do you think that digital's kind of lost that entirely, or do you think it could still be there, it's just behind a computer screen maybe?
Me, I've totally gone digital.
Yeah.
I do have some projects going on film, but I think what's beautiful is the process. You know, how you get there doesn't matter. When we used to go in the darkroom, we used to make like small 10, 15 prints for the final edit. This hasn't changed for me. You know, if I have a long-term project, let's say of 4 years or 5 years shooting on an issue or a project, and you end up with those 200 prints that you're looking on your computer one after another, one after another, one after another. At a point I have to print those, because I want to see them spread on the table.
Absolutely.
I want to be able to see
Touch it.
10 prints together. How do they look? What do I feel when I see 15 prints on the table? What do these 4 prints do together? You're not able to see this on a monitor, even if it's a huge monitor, you know. And at the end, you end up with something very organic, you know, and that's very, very beautiful.
I really identify with that, because my work is, you know, a lot of my work's been exhibited or, you know, in a book, and for me, there's such a joy of the physical print. It doesn't matter if it comes from a digital camera, but the physical print is a piece of magic, really, isn't it? And the way you can then tell your story, and how you tell your story with how you select the kind of the journey through, is such an art form in itself. So I completely get that.
Absolutely, I agree as well. I mean, and I think, like, if I come back from a trip with one photograph, I'm pretty happy. And you're then asking quite a difficult task, where you're trying to boil down normally quite a deep, profound narrative into one singular moment, and that's a lot to ask. And you know, even if you have weeks out in a place, just to kind of capture all of that in the single scene, that's when the image selection becomes really important. And you know, you're not relying on having hundreds of photographs where you can kind of show a little bit of X and a little bit of Y. You need everything in that one moment, and that's why it's really important. You're not just firing off shots and shot after shot, because that's just documentation. That's why you need to step back and think about how that scene is unfurling. And then once you've got that singular moment, when you can print it out big, that's when the magic happens, isn't it?
How do you select the one? How do you select it?
So it's a really good question, because I often leave it quite a long time after a trip, because I find that I am very subjective, emotionally subjective, because I'll have an amazing wildlife experience, which it meant a lot to me, or you know, it's just beautiful, and I thought in the moment that was a great photograph. But these animal interactions can be very different. A sort of a quality interaction versus a good photographic opportunity don't always go hand in hand. So I find if I leave it a little bit of time, I can find myself much more objective, and I go back to it, I can clearly go, well, no, it was great, but it was not a good photograph. Move on.
Yeah, I agree with this. Sometimes it's, you know, your experience or the difficulty of shooting a photograph, or the effort you put in trying to get a photograph, you get an emotional bound.
Connection.
And you know, if you leave time enough, then you get those away, you know. But I really, for the editing and selecting photographs, I believe in teamwork. And you know, we photographers normally are lonely.
Yeah, we are.
person,
Lone wolves.
shooting by ourselves. We write our own captions. You do your own post-production. But me, I love teamwork, you know, because sometimes edit has the magic of changing drastically what you thought you were going to photograph. And you know, you can not have, you know, not be an expert about an issue or a topic, go there, but be visually smart enough, and then give those photographs to a good editor, and they will make the magic for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes I'll do a shoot and I won't want to look at them for a couple of weeks, unless I've been commissioned and I have to turn it over in 24 hours, which is then I don't overthink. But sometimes I almost can't bear to look at them because I'm worried about, did I really mess up? So I'm overthinking. And then when I look at them and I edit them, when I'm selecting images, I select because it emotionally moves me, because I connect with that one image out of, maybe there's 30 and there's the one image. But what you were saying about teamwork, I mean, it's so important to find people who can help you curate, or to work with curators, or to work with book designers, or to work with people who are experienced, who can show you a different view of the story that you've created. I think that's like a fascinating process.
So one thing that I think would be really interesting to go through, because we've had an incredible discussion there, is the whole workflow process, right? How do you get from capturing that image and then a print on a table? So I think if we go through, because you're all going to have slightly different workflows, so it'd be really interesting to see how you differ. So if you want to go first.
Probably the most important part is long before I've taken a photo. You know, so with wild animals, you're in control of so little that you have to have a really clear idea of narrative and sort of scene long before it happens, so that when it does present itself, if it presents itself, you'll be ready for it. So we spend a lot of time in research, and that's kind of key stage one. Then obviously we go out there, we take the images, and it's a case of whittling them down. I normally have quite a good idea in my head what were the moments that spoke to me narrative-wise. So that can kind of immediately limit the kind of areas I'm looking for through my images. And then, like I say, I leave it for a little bit, and I kind of take a step back and try not to be too hasty. And then it's a case of getting it down to 1 to 5 images normally. And I will do a first look and feel edit, which I will then take to my printers, and we will discuss about what works and what doesn't, and we will print a proof, a big proof, normally 60 to 80 inches. And that's when you really see how the edit's going, because things can look fantastic on a glossy screen, and then you print it out and you go, oh God, that looks awful. I get a little sort of red pencil and start circling stuff, and that's when we kind of try to polish it down to quite a refined, finished item. And then sometimes we need a second one, or sometimes we sadly find that we print it big and it just doesn't work, and that is just unfortunately the way it goes. So it's I think it's probably quite an old-fashioned way of going around it, but it kind of works for me. It works with the fine art thing particularly, because printing it out big, that's when the impact came, that's when the emotion came. So that's always really exciting for me, particularly when I know it does work. And that's always relieving and exciting at the same time.
So my workflow is really dependent on the job that I'm doing. If it's my own project, which I do a lot of personal work, then I will do the shoot. But before I do the shoot, I think about the shoot. I have a process. And then I do the portrait sitting or portrait shoot or assignment. I then download it onto my computer into a little folder. I then put that folder into Lightroom. I then look through Lightroom and select, I go through them all, and it's literally, I don't want to overthink it. It's literally, does this move me? Does this work? And some pictures jump out, and I'll select them. And then if I need to, I do a little edit on Lightroom with the curves or whatever, and then sometimes I'll take them into Photoshop. And I might take them into Photoshop if it's going to print. And I'm looking at print profiles, and I'm looking at, it's a different thing when it's been printed. I think a lot of my work is printed.
So Carolyn, specifically, this shot behind you, this is one that you wanted to talk us through and the process of you shooting this. So if you want to talk through this shot.
So this is the Generations Portraits of Holocaust Survivors Commission. It was the pressure was that it was going to be exhibited at the Imperial War Museum in London and at the Royal Photographic Society. So this is the end portrait that I selected from Hanneke's kind of portrait sitting. I had not met Hanneke before. I talked to her, but I'd not met her before. She was born in Holland in 1943. She was born in silence because her parents were Jewish. The Nazis were in Holland, and she had to be born in absolute silence and in hiding. And this portrait here is Hanneke holding a picture of her as a newborn and her mother, so that tells that story. So before I selected that as the final portrait that told Hanneke's story, I went through various different options. So Hanneke had these amazing photographs, and she lives in a beautiful place. So there I thought, okay, let's have Hanneke. She loves the countryside. Let's have her by the countryside. She decided on what she was going to wear. But it just didn't kind of resonate. There was no motion for me. So we get nice pictures. Maybe that's a little bit more impactful. So I'm looking at, does this tell a story or not? I still didn't think it did. And then I actually really liked these. So she was in her doorway, and there was something really powerful about her face. And I really liked them. And then I thought, you know what? I love natural light, and I want to have that atmospheric, real natural light. So I went into her room, and then we got to that one. And that just, for me, didn't need to be any explanation. You kind of can't tell something about her. There's a connection. If you look at her, she's really connected with me as a photographer, with you as the viewers, and she's holding this incredibly precious, interesting photo. So that's how I selected, and it kind of almost jumped out for me. But they were the range of pictures I took before the one I selected.
So, Pep, if you want to talk us through your workflow from start to end?
Yeah, my workflow is a little bit different because I work on long-term projects, so I like adventure. I consider myself a bad journalist because I don't like to do research. I prefer to spend long time in those places to be able to get my own ideas and conclusions. So I really like the photography which is emotional. I think you have to, in order to express emotions, you have to live them. So that's the kind of work I like. But they are busy with one big picture, one iconic picture. Sometimes I get one of these, but my projects are more narrative long-term. So I can't look at one single picture. I have to look at a strong photograph, but at the end of the day I have to tell a story. So my edits are longer. Maybe I come back from a trip with, 40, 50,000 images, and then I have to go down to 100 images. So normally I use those images to make an edit for the Noor archive, and then I make an edit for editorial. I do have to always bear in mind the horizontal, vertical for editorial and magazines, the step backs, the establishing shots, and the close-ups. So my stories are different. But at the end, when I'm satisfied, is when my work is published. So when my work appears in the cover of an important magazine, and all the stress and all the pain and suffering I had to witness a lot of time, and people can finally be part of a story that they were not supposed to be part of. That's my moment of glory, because I hate editing.
You mentioned about how important teamwork is and some of the stuff that you've done in the past. So is that how you get from 50,000 down to 100, or is there something?
First I edit by the guts, by the feeling, and by the story. I have to make the story understandable, and I have to be truthful to the story. So I have to make sure all the aspects of the story that I've witnessed, they have to be there. So there is a methodic part of making sure the story is told the way I saw and the way I believe it should be told. And then there is another part of the process in editing, which is more in detail of looking at the best picture, where the light, composition, and moment is there, and then you look for the magic. So we say at Noor always, kill the darlings and keep the loved ones. So, it's a very painful process of getting rid of very good photographs, but less is more. you know. And if you can make an edit of 12 photographs, you shouldn't have 120, you know. And that's the painful process, and this requires experience.
And there are times to leave it, right? I
Yes.
find this often you over edit, and it's really important, I think, to leave it, walk away from your computer or however you're editing, and come back to it, because it's so easy in the moment to sort of oversaturate, over contrast, and make it bigger and better and better. And it sort of depends on your editing style, I guess. You know, I'm relatively naturalistic. I try to capture things the way that I see them, but even then, you know, you can find that memories, particularly, they're quite subjective. So you can remember it being this amazing, colourful moment, and you come back to it and you look at it and you go, Christ, it's like way too oversaturated. So I think, yeah, it's so easy to overdo things, particularly, I think, in the days of Instagram, you know, where people are just trying to be brighter and better and bigger than everyone else. So yeah, less is more, I think, in editing style for sure.
Yeah, also when I edit, something I didn't mention is that, you know, I edit, of course, raw files. I never, because I don't color my work, but when I send a large selection to my color grading people in Barcelona and it comes back, it's sometimes easier to decide which ones look better than the others, just because of how the color or the black and white turn out.
Do you show them your people that you work with, your editors, your colour graders? Do they know your aesthetic? Do they know what you
but
like?
my aesthetics, it varies from every story, you know. I don't like to be recognized by aesthetics.
Yeah. That's very interesting, because it's sort of almost totally the opposite in the fine art world, where one of the biggest compliments you can give a so-called fine artist is to have a style, a recognizable style. And you know, what you're seeking is that someone could walk into a room and see your picture and not know it's done by you, but no, that's a Harry Skeggs. So that's kind of interesting. It's sort of totally the opposite. And you know, I always beat myself up about, you know, am I constantly trying to change too much, or should I just accept a style? But I mean, it's a subjective thing, and I'm a big believer in equipment and art itself, and the kind of concept of art is constantly developing, so we should too. So I sort of rationalize it that way, but. Yeah, it's sort of interesting.
No, I mean, there are photographers, there are photojournalists that, I'm not going to give names, but you see a picture and you understand exactly this is this guy.
Yeah.
But for me, I become bored very fast, very quick, you know.
No, I do too.
I need challenges, you know, and I work with very talented people in terms of color grading and post-production, but there is so little I can do in the world of photojournalism, you know. Now I'm opening up more to more advertising and commercial and personal work, and there I'm having more fun.
Do you know, it's really interesting to hear you both talk, because though we're from absolutely different genres, you know, yours is about the story of the people, the experience of those people. Yours is about that one particular iconic photograph, but it's also about your kind of experience there. People can tell my work because it's about the connection with me and the subject and the person. There are all these crossovers, which I've found so interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, which has, you know, been really enlightening for me, because we're just very different photographers.
Yeah, and that's what's so wonderful about photography, isn't it? Is that there is room for anyone, really. Whatever you want to do, whatever type of photographer, whatever kind of ambitions you have, there's space for everyone. And you know, it's become such a wide playing field. Particularly these days, I think, with the sort of increases in sort of digital art and photo manipulation and collaging and compositing, this kind of thing, you know, it's incredible to see how photography started at this quite narrow genre and it's just bloomed beyond anyone's kind of wildest anticipation. You know, everyone's a photographer. Everyone's got a camera phone or a digital camera or something. Everyone's making art, and that's really, really exciting kind of genre to be included in.
I think we've covered a lot of information there. We had some really good discussions, right? So, and to echo what you said, I think actually we do share quite a lot of things that we do slightly differently, and then some things that we do similar. But one thing I'd really like to end on is just a couple of sentences, is if there was someone that was at home that's either struggling to choose that final image, or struggling to find their style, or to find how to edit their images, you know, what's that couple words of advice that you would give them? And we'll go through all three of you for that as a kind of a piece to end on.
I think for me, the beauty of photography is that you see the world differently to everyone else. So choose the subjects and the photographs that really show how you feel and how you think and what interests you, because that's not necessarily how other people think and feel, and that will then be intrinsically interesting.
Yeah.
So speak from the heart, shoot from the heart. I think that's the important thing.
I agree with you, actually. I think step aside from your edit. You can always involve somebody else looking at it. Don't overthink. I always overthink. Do not overthink. Let the story come out. When you edit, let the story come out, and sometimes that involves finding somebody to look at that edit, or stepping out and giving it a couple of days and going back to the edit.
That's good advice.
I would say follow your instinct, you know, be stubborn. But if more than 3 people tell you is wrong, then think about it.
But if it's 2, ignore it.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, I really like that. Well, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for you know, sharing your insights into your images and your editing. I think we've had, as I said, a real great discussion. So thank you so much for joining. Thank you guys for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again on the next episode of Nikon Sessions. Thank you very much. Goodbye.